Blackthorn sees players taking on the role of an ex-army officer whose goal is to bring an end to the oppressive rule of the game's main villain, Sarlacc. Gameplay-wise, it shares much in common with the likes of Castlevania, but instead of being armed with a sword, you possess a shotgun and a whole range of diverse abilities that can be learned over the course of the game, such as bombs and various upgrades to your gun that make managing each situation all the more enjoyable. Each of them play a role not only in taking on enemies, but also figuring out various puzzles that break up the gameplay as well. They often require you to think outside of the box in order to progress, which helps the experience stand out and not just become another clone. Visually, Blackthorn is a real looker. The atmosphere is often dark and gritty, but the crisp and clear sprites as well as the backgrounds provide a unique style to the on-screen action that looks absolutely phenomenal. It is well and truly worth playing it now. The Super Nintendo is home to a whole range of incredible fighters, but as with most systems, there are many games that go by largely unnoticed, and Battle Tycoon Flash Hiders is one of them. On the surface, it does seem quite generic, but what helps it stand out when compared to others on the system is the managerial aspects of the gameplay. Instead of simply choosing a fighter and making your way through a predetermined set of opponents, Battle Tycoon instead sees you placing bets on each encounter. By winning a fight, you are rewarded with a different value depending on your performance and difficulty of the opponent. This money that you earn can then be spent on cool upgrades for your fighter that can further enhance your chances of taking out those you come across. Now, there are several characters to choose from, who each possess their own unique set of skills as well as basic combos that make trying out each of them essential in order to find one that suits your style. And once you've grown tired of the single player content, Battle Tycoon manages to include a two-player option as well, which immensely adds to the longevity of the game. By no means is this the best fighter on the system by any count, but Battle Tycoon Flash Riders is bound to keep fans busy for quite some time, which in my opinion makes it worth checking out. Knights of the Round is often dismissed as just Final Fight with swords, but the game is actually so much deeper than this common misconception. Instead of taking to the streets of the city and slaying street punks, it sees you taking up the fight as one of the several characters based around the story of King Arthur, as you attempt to stabilize the kingdom under his rule. Each of them possess a string of basic attacks, as well as special skills and weapons that make a tangible difference once playing. From swords to spears and bows, there's plenty of variety that makes going through each run all the more rewarding. Now, as opposed to the majority of beat-em-ups where you could care less about killing everything that moves, Knights of the Round has quite the incentive to take everything in sight down. By collecting treasure, defeating enemies, collecting health when your life bar is already full, and beating the levels quickly, you'll earn a series of experience points. When you reach a certain amount of points, you level up, and eventually gain better looking armor and weaponry that helps you in taking on each situation you'll find yourself in. This aspect alone is really what helps the game shine. Going through each character and watching them evolve over the course of the game is both incredibly addictive and rewarding. If you're on the lookout for a new beat 'em up to get into on the system, Knights of the Round is a really good choice. Run Saber is an action platformer that at first glance seems to share many characteristics with the likes of Strider on the Mega Drive. It sees you taking up the fight as a cyborg with superhuman abilities as you attempt to rid the world of a mad scientist who has turned humanity into mindless mutants. Taking advantage of your skills is the order of the day, which will see you scaling walls and sliding on the ground at lightning fast speeds, which soon becomes your main means of traversal as you make it through each level. Now, the game is quite short, with only 5 areas making an appearance throughout the adventure, but the minute-to-minute gameplay more than makes up for it. Your primary method of attack is an energy blade, as well as a couple of special moves such as a spin attack and a flying kick that make dealing with each enemy a breeze. Now, the main aspect of Run Saber that shines and needs a special mention are the visuals. It takes full advantage of Mode 7. It helps the game spring to life and present unique environments to the player, such as a battle that takes place on a fighter jet which continually loops around in the air as you fight it out. It's really impressive and cements Run Saber as one of the best looking games on the system. Even if you're just a passing fan of action platformers, Run Saber totally deserves a look. Ninja Warriors is one of those often overlooked games on the Super Nintendo that never really got the recognition it deserved. Starting out life in the arcades, it made the move to the home system and introduced players to one of 3 cyborg ninjas who set out to squash the plans of an escaped convict set on taking over the world. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up that sees you taking on wave after wave of enemies with only a handful of options at your disposal. They all have access to basic moves as well as individual special attacks that make experimenting with each a must for those playing for the first time. Overall, the game consists of about 8 stages that all differ in style and location, as well as a different boss waiting for you at the end of each. These encounters is where a lot of the challenge lies, and at times had the potential to become quite frustrating, but if you take advantage of all of the options that the game gives you, and what you've learned up until that point, you'll take them down in no time and continue to progress. In my opinion, Ninja Warriors is one of the finest beat 'em ups on the system, so if you've never played it, do yourself a favor and try it out. Sparkster is an action platformer that's essentially a spin-off to the original that appeared on the Sega Mega Drive. On the surface, it seems like another run-of-the-mill take on the popular genre, but upon further inspection, it soon becomes apparent that its take on the formula is something to be admired. As you would expect, you take up the role of Sparkster and are presented with a series of levels to overcome that are all tied to the difficulty setting you choose. But the real star of the show is the gameplay, which quite honestly is some of the best on the system. Sparkster comes equipped with a sword that has the ability to fire energy bolts, and by using this ability you can dispatch enemies from a safe distance or decide to get up close and personal. Either way is quite effective, so you'll find yourself using both during battle. But if that isn't enough, Sparkster also packs a rocket pack. When fully charged, the rocket pack can blast Sparkster across the screen, ramming into anything that gets into his way. By aiming in any of the 8 directions, you can actually ricochet off the surroundings and turn yourself into a deadly projectile that is bound to level enemies in a flash. Sparkster really is an excellent game. It's just too bad that it passed most people by and never really received the recognition it deserved. Seventh Saga has to be hands down one of the most difficult and challenging RPGs I've ever played. I'm sure anyone you ask about this game will tell you the exact same, but if you can look past it, there is actually a pretty robust and rewarding game buried underneath it. Now this is an old school RPG in every sense of the word, and a lot of the difficulty comes from the complete lack of hand-holding that is often prevalent in games that are released today. You can expect to die a lot, and I mean a lot, which could have the potential to turn many players away. Now the battle system is turn-based in nature, and is naturally centered around leveling up and gaining new abilities to take on foes. The game forces you to strategize and put some actual thought into your actions, which all have repercussions throughout the adventure. Using an item at the wrong time or trying to plow through each encounter will often end in defeat, but fortunately for those that plan ahead and use each and every option available to adapt to a problem, victory will often be yours. If you're looking for a challenge and are actually up for one, then look no further. On the other hand, if patience is something you don't have a great deal of, Seventh Saga is probably not for you. Firepower 2000 went by largely unnoticed upon its release in 1992. Thanks to the abundance of quality shooters on the system, it's quite easy to see why. It didn't try to shake up the genre or innovate in any way, but what it did do was take a solid idea and execute it extremely well. You get to control one of 2 vehicles, one being a tank and the other being a helicopter, and are tasked with completing a series of stages that naturally increase in difficulty the further you progress. As you would expect, an abundance of power-ups and special items litter the playing field and play a key role to your success. Complementing this are the simple and responsive controls that help you feel really in control of your vehicle, with each ability being assigned to a face button for simple and easy access. Now playing the game alone can be a bit of a challenge thanks to the level of difficulty on offer. Thankfully though, a 2-player option is included, and it is here where Firepower 2000 really comes into its own and soon becomes the best way to experience the game. So if you're lucky enough to have someone who's willing to go through it with you, I'm sure Firepower 2000 will soon become one of your favorites as well. Macross Scrambled is a side-scrolling shooter that never made it outside of Japan. As the name suggests, it's based on the popular anime series Macross and sees the player choosing from a selection of pilots, who each possess their own unique weaponry for their machine. Known as a Valkyrie fighter, these machines have 3 separate modes of operation that specifically tailor it to the situation at hand. The first being a simple fighter jet that affords the player a smaller profile and allows them to maneuver more swiftly through the environment. The second, known as Jerwalk, has a slightly larger profile, with the third form named Batdroid being the slowest out of each of them. As you might imagine, the weapons used for each form become far more effective depending on which state you are currently in. As your size increases, your ability to navigate becomes harder, but at the same time so does the amount of damage you can deal out. Because of this, you'll constantly find yourself switching between all of them on the fly. This strategy becomes nigh on essential for the impressive boss battles that litter the entire experience, and in all honesty they soon become one of the better parts of the overall game. As the name suggests, the fireman puts you into the role of a firefighter and presents one, if not the most quirkiest games on the Super Nintendo. It's best described as a shooter, but instead of a gun you carry a water hose. The fire itself stands in for the regular enemies you would usually find, and at first it sounds utterly boring, but once you play it and realize that the fire can often move and even attack in some cases, it all begins to click, and the struggle between managing your health and tackling each blaze really begins to take effect. In order to achieve this balance, you can fire your hose in two different ways, straight ahead or at the floor right in front of you. The latter is required to extinguish small flames and can protect your character, but it slows you down, whereas the first option gives you a lot more reach. After only a few minutes, you'll find yourself alternating between the two modes, and it becomes second nature, as both firing modes are very useful in certain situations. Now, the game is broken up into 6 separate stages that end with a boss fight, but unfortunately it probably won't last you that long, as it can be completed in about an hour. This aspect does slightly let it down, but the overall premise and gameplay more than make up for it. Despite it not being one of the best looking games on the system, The Fireman really does prove that looks aren't everything, and it's how it plays that really matters. Well, that does it for today's video. Don't forget to hit subscribe to stay up to date on future videos. As always, thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.